Discover 5 sinister trick-or-treating tales that haunt your Halloween forever. The wind gusted through the barren branches, carrying with it a sense of unease that crept through Clara's neighborhood like a ghost. The leaves crunched beneath her feet as she stood on her porch, adjusting the last paper ghost with shaky hands. Shadows lengthened, and a chill shot down her spine. Ethan, her bright-eyed 6-year-old, peered out through the door, excitement bubbling up amidst the tales of missing children that floated around town like cursed whispers. The air, thick with tension, did little to dim his joy. Clara plastered on a smile, turning every frown into a visible effort. The chatter of laughter erupted from surrounding houses, but she could feel an undercurrent of fear. It gnawed at her like dark claws, and whispers about the candy man riddled their attempts at normalcy. Characters from normal Halloween parties morphed into sinister shapes of malevolence, shrouded in darkness. As she finished her decorations, an ominous ping startled her, a text from an unknown number. Hands trembling, she clicked it open. "Stay inside tonight. The candy man hides among trick-or-treaters." Dread filled the pit of her stomach. Was her neighborhood truly a safe haven, or had the comfort of familiarity become a death sentence? She wished she could keep Ethan close, shield him from whatever evil lurked beyond their door. But the child's gaze glinted with eager anticipation. She couldn't shatter his hopes. The street soon transformed into a kaleidoscope of orange and purple, the glow of jack-o'-lanterns illuminating faces marked by fear and anxiety. Kids scampered across yards, their laughter a sickly sweet sound that contrasted sharply with the creeping dread that curled around Clara. She clutched Ethan's hand tightly, but felt a watchful eyes on her. Parents exchanged glances, whispers swelling like a wave of panic. What if her instinct was right? What if danger lay around the very corner, cloaked in a mask, hidden in plain sight? Suddenly, a scream cut through the joyous chaos. Clara's heart thundered in her chest as she watched a mother frantically drag her child away, eyes wild with terror, murmuring something about the candy man. Time froze momentarily as Clara stood petrified, instincts screaming at her to gather Ethan and flee. But she took a steadying breath, forcing her fear down. They had done this last year. They'd be fine. Clara wandered deeper into the throng, her pulse quickening. The laughter seemed to bubble into a frenzied chaos. Shadows danced around her, and the smiles that greeted her felt hollow now, each doorbell ring tinged with a sinister note of dread. Just as Clara found Ethan among his friends, she caught sight of a figure lingering in the distance, edging closer, cloaked in the veil of Halloween night. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The figure moved, their features obscured by the flicker of streetlights, twisting into haunting shadows. Clara's heart pounded harder, instantly recognizing the predator lurking in the darkness. The trick-or-treating had morphed into a real-life horror show. Panic surged. She pulled Ethan close, every maternal instinct firing on all cylinders. Just then, the figure stepped forward, eyes glimmering like a predator staring at its prey. A ghastly smile stretched across its face, revealing a truth darker than the Halloween night itself. Was this a nightmare stretching before them, or a reckoning ripping through the facade of safety? Either way, time felt cruelly suspended, danger curling closer, the haunting waiting to unfold. The figure stood before them, a predator in a sea of trick-or-treaters. Clara's breath caught in her throat, as every mother's fear danced vividly in her mind. She squeezed Ethan's hand tighter, his small fingers trembling in response. "Mommy, who is that?" he whispered, eyes wide and innocent. "Just someone. Just another costume," she stammered, her voice strained. Yet, she could feel the weight of dread settle heavier on her chest. The figure tilted its head, an unnatural movement, as if sizing them up. Its costume was a patchwork of rags, a blend of garish colors that somehow felt wrong. The mask twisted into a grotesque grin, while its eyes glowed unnaturally, piercing through the crowded fray. "Let us go," Clara urged. She nudged Ethan backward, trying to shield him from the looming presence. The laughter and cries of children faded, replaced by a heavy silence that wrapped around them, tight and suffocating. Just as she turned to lead Ethan away, the figure lunged. Panic rippled through her. If she could just reach the safety of the house, everything would be fine. But before she could react, the figure spoke, voice low and chilling. "I have treats. Special ones." The words seemed to slither through the air, wrapping around Clara and Ethan, binding them with fear. Her heart raced. Every instinct screamed to flee. The creature's eyes bored into her, as if it could see the tremor in her resolve. As if sensing her reluctance, the figure gestured towards a sack at its side, filled with glistening, wrapped candies. "Trick or treat, little boy?" it crooned, but the mock cheer felt like a blade slicing through her resolve. "Mommy, I want candy," Ethan squealed, tugging at her arm. Clara's stomach twisted. "No, Ethan. Stay close," she whispered fiercely, panic clawing at her throat. The figure took a step forward, grinning wider than before, revealing a set of darkened teeth. The parents around them had begun to scatter, the whispers escalating into frantic shouts. Was this monster truly hiding in plain sight? "Come closer, little one," it hissed, unblinking. Fireworks lit the sky, momentarily breaking the spell of terror. A few houses flickered with lighting effects, shadows dancing in the backdrop as laughter erupted again, but Clara felt none of that joy. The trick-or-treaters widened their circle, slowly inching away. In the distance, Clara spotted a group of parents huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. One of them frantically gestured towards them, muffled words of warning drifting like specters. Were they all aware of the danger? Or had this monster wrapped them up in its spell too? She needed a plan. Clara turned her back on the figure, holding Ethan close against her. But the moment she did, she felt an icy hand clasp her shoulder. The world around her froze once more. "It's too late for running," the figure said, voice now chillingly sweet. "Once you let the evil in, it never leaves." Clara's breath caught, and the distant laughter of children felt like shards of glass. As she twisted to confront the figure, Ethan whimpered beside her. She needed to act. They needed to get home, fast. Her heart raced, and she crushed the unshed tears behind determined eyes. Just then, the figure leaned closer, its breath a rancid whisper. "Stay with me and get all the treats, or be left with nothing." With every fiber of her being, Clara didn't know what to choose. She glanced at Ethan, and for a split second, the world around them fell silent, the air thickening with unspoken terror. They were trapped, and she could feel the darkness closing in. What price would she pay to protect her son from the horrors of Halloween night? And was the candy truly worth the cost? They stepped forward, closer to the brink. Clara's mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of fear and maternal instinct. The figure loomed before them, eyes aglow with something dark and sinister. Everything in her screamed to flee, to protect Ethan at all costs. Yet her body felt glued to the spot, rooted in terror. "Mommy, I want the treats." Ethan's voice, eager and innocent, cut through her haze. She could see the child inside her baby, innocent to the malevolence standing just inches away. Clara's heart twisted painfully at the thought of his sweet faith in the world, a faith she desperately wanted to preserve. "Ethan," she whispered urgently as the figure leaned closer, its rancid breath washing over her like a wave of necrotic dread. "We need to go. Now." But the creature's hand shot out, fingers curling like skeletal claws around Clara's wrist. The grip was cold, inhumanly so, and it sent a shock of ice straight down her spine. "Don't be rude, sweet boy," it crooned, its voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I have plenty of special treats just for you." In the corner of her eye, children darted past, parents rounding them up in a frantic hurry to escape. The figure's kidnapper smile grew wider as they passed, but Clara could barely register their retreat. Each heartbeat was loud, pounding in her ears, drowning out everything but the primal instinct that screamed run. Ethan pulled her hand. I want to stay. I want candy. No, Clara hissed, stimulating the fright inside. She turned to Ethan, whose bright eyes were now clouded with confusion and desire. It was a battle she couldn't afford to lose. Ethan, please. I love you and I need you to trust me. The figure laughed, a sound that reverberated in her chest like a low tremor. Love? Love won't save you tonight. With a surge of adrenaline, Clara yanked Ethan closer, pulling him into her. It was time to take action. With every ounce of willpower, she shoved against the figure, hoping to distract it just long enough to sprint away. Ethan, hold on tight, she shouted, and they turned, racing through the crowds. The world blurred around them, shadows throwing themselves against the orange glow of jack-o'-lanterns. Her heart felt wild, thrumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. She could almost hear it shaking off the chill of the figure's icy breath. They darted down an alley, the cacophony of cheers fading into fearful whispers. Clara risked a glance back, dread pooling in her stomach. But the figure still stood there, watching them, expression unchanging. It didn't chase, and that was 1,000 times worse. What's happening, Mommy? Ethan breathed, his innocence tearing through her like a knife. Just hold on, she managed to say, desperation clawing at her throat. They stumbled to the end of the alley where sunlight barely pierced through the thick clouds. In that moment she thought they were safe. But the air felt thick with tension, like a storm holding its breath. They emerged onto another street, where something was different now. The decorations seemed darker, the shadows deeper. Children, still giddy with Halloween delight, were now eerily silent, eyes glassy. The laughter had vanished, replaced by a disquieting hush that sat heavily on her shoulders. A flicker of movement caught her eye. A child, no older than Ethan, stood in front of a house, staring back at them with blank eyes. For every desperate pulse in Clara's heart, the child didn't blink, didn't speak. Mommy, I'm scared. Ethan's voice trembled again, breaking her from the spell of dread. Me too, buddy, Clara whispered, gripping his small hand as they kept moving. She could feel the darkness pulsing behind them, following, waiting for a moment of vulnerability to strike. Let us just go home. We just need to find our way. But the streets twisted in on themselves. The houses looked familiar yet wrong, as if the world had transformed into a nightmare landscape. No matter which direction they turned, the shadows stretched longer. I want candy, Ethan cried again, voice breaking through the surreal fog, and Clara's heart sank lower. The figure's laughter echoed through her mind, taunting her. What if it wasn't just a costume? What if the evil was embedded in the very fabric of this cursed night? A chilling breeze swept through the alley, carrying the scent of decay. And just then, in the dimming light, Clara saw it, a giant pumpkin with a leering face, its carved grin too wide. It hovered at the end of the street, pulsating, drawing her in. What is that? Ethan whimpered, instinctively drawing back. I don't know. But we need to keep moving, Clara replied, her voice steadying. A profound fear gnawed at her insides. The call of the pumpkin felt dangerous, like it was alive, beckoning them closer. As they took another step toward safety, Clara swore she saw the reflection of a face in the wide grin of the pumpkin. A face that was familiar, a face that seemed to scream. What waited for them in the fading light? Would they succumb to the very fears that had followed them all night? With dread entwining with her resolve, Clara turned to her son. Stay close, Ethan. Whatever happens, we face it together. But hesitation clung to her, like a thick fog. Would they survive this night? Or would the true horror of Halloween come for them at last? The world around Clara twisted tighter, shadows lengthening as they fought against the deepening night. The pulsating pumpkin loomed ahead, its sinister gaze seeming to watch every move. Clara felt Ethan tug at her hand, his small fingers trembling. Mommy, I don't like this, he whined, looking up at her with wide, fearful eyes. Me neither, sweetheart, she said through gritted teeth, her own heart racing. Staring into the jack-o'-lantern-esque grin, she felt an instinctive urge to run. Yet her legs felt heavy, as if the air itself was laced with a kind of malevolence that sought to paralyze her. The chilling breeze returned, curling around them like icy fingers, whispering secrets of dread that prickled at her skin. Clara turned away from the pumpkin, knowing that if it was alive, it was a darkness they could not face. "Come on, Ethan," she urged, pulling him with her as they stumbled down the street. But the atmosphere thickened, darkness creeping in from all sides. Each house they passed felt like a trap, adorned with garish decorations that turned grotesque in the dim light. A mere flicker of movement caught her glance, and she whipped her head around, heart pounding. Children lurked in the shadows, watching them with hollow eyes, their laughter now twisted into something sinister. "Mommy, do you see those kids?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Clara nodded, but the sight of their vacant stares sent shivers racing down her spine. "They're not normal." "No, they aren't," she muttered, pushing further away, willing herself to ignore their staring faces. Echoes of the figure's laughter haunted her now, a predator-esque amusement lurking at the edge of her sanity. They turned a corner, breath hitching. The street was markedly still, as if waiting for something awful to occur. Clara looked for any sign of familiarity, any landmark, but everything twisted in a funhouse mirror reality, disorienting and wrong. "There," Ethan pointed, breaking her focus. A faint flicker of light appeared in the distance, the outline of a diner, its neon glow distant but inviting. "Let us go," Clara said, her feet finding a mindless urgency. Desperate was the desperation driving her, carrying them through the heavy silence. As they approached, shadows shifted alarmingly, making the world seem alive with watchful eyes. Ethan clutched at her, voice almost frantic. "Mommy, what if they're all like the other kids?" "I don't know," she admitted, fear coursing through her veins like venom. "But we can't stop. We have to get to the diner." But as they neared the entrance, a different kind of dread settled over Clara. Silhouettes loomed outside, shifting in the darkness. Figures cloaked in costumes that seemed too real, too still. And then she saw it, a child, hunched over, its back turned. The sound of soft sobs drifted through the air, echoing into an unnatural lull. "Mommy?" Ethan trembled beside her. "Stay close, baby," she murmured, pulling him into her. But even as she tried to comfort him, Clara felt a pull towards the sobbing child, the promise of innocence lost. "Please?" A voice faltered, barely more than a whisper. It seeped into the air around them, heavy with sorrow. "Ethan, don't look," she urged, taking a step back. But it was too late. "Why is it crying?" he asked, voice barely audible, innocent curiosity intermingling with overwhelming dread. Clara ripped her gaze away, instinct flaring. She needed to react. "We have to go. Now." She dragged Ethan away from the diner doors, pulse hammering in her throat. But the shadows began to stir. The figures outside began to shift, inching closer, gathering like a dark storm. "Join us. Come play." They beckoned, voices swirling together into a maddening choir. She felt trapped, panic rising as darkness closed in. "Ethan, run," she shouted, and they sprinted past the diner, echoing whispers trailing behind them. But the world continued to shift around them, the air suffocating. Clara's mind was a turbulent storm of fear and guilt. Could she keep her baby safe? Were they running toward escape, or deeper into a nightmare? The shadows morphed into shapes just out of reach, and that familiar laughter echoed back louder, closer, relentless. "Ethan, hold on," she screamed, but suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, threatening to swallow them whole. What emerged from the shadows ahead? Would the horrors of the night finally ensnare them? Pressing forward, Clara felt desperation clawing at her throat, realizing that safety might only be an illusion. When would this hellscape end? And what terror waited just beyond the veil? They ran blindly, legs heavy with dread, Clara's heart racing as she turned sharply into an alley the only escape from the malevolence that seemed to swirl around them. "Ethan, keep up!" she gasped, pulling him closer. The alley felt suffocating, walls closing in as the oppressive darkness pooled around them. She could still hear that haunting laughter in the distance, echoing through the narrow space like a taunt. "Amami?" Ethan's voice quivered, panic mounting in his small frame. "Shoo! It's okay," she whispered, though her own fear gnawed at her insides. Clara dared a glance behind them and stifled a scream. The shadows were alive, a writhing mass reaching out as if yearning to snatch them back into the void. Every instinct in her screamed to push forward, to escape whatever horror pursued them. The alley ended abruptly, leading them to a winding street lined with flickering streetlights. But the warmth of yellow light felt deceiving, bathed as it was in the hollow orange glow of Halloween decorations. She scanned the area, searching for signs of life, but the street was empty, save for occasional shadows lurking just beyond her eyes' reach. "Hurry," she urged, forcing them to move faster. "There must be someone nearby." They turned another corner, and Clara flinched at the sight that met her. An old woman sat on her porch, her gnarled hands clutching a bowl of candy. A wide grin spread across her cracked lips, but her eyes they shone with a predatory glint. "Come closer, dear," the woman croaked. The invitation felt heavy with malice. "I've been waiting for you." Ethan flinched, instinctively grabbing Clara's hand tighter. "Mommy, I don't want to," he cried, eyes filling with fear. "Stay back," Clara shouted, pulling him away, heart pounding in her chest as she turned to flee. But as they moved, the air grew thicker, like molasses. It was harder to breathe, harder to move, as the darkness encroached again, wicked whispers winding through the night. "Don't leave it so lonely." The voice curled around them like smoke, coaxing. Clara fought the urge to look back, pulling Ethan into her arms as they stumbled toward the next street. Something flickered in the corner of her vision, a glimmer of light emanating from a nearby house. She darted towards it, hoping to find refuge. But as they got closer, the good intentions of the light waned, replaced by a sinister glow that made her gut churn. "Mommy," Ethan whimpered again, his small frame shaking in her embrace. "Just a little further," she reassured him, but doubt gnawed at her. At the front of the house stood a sign, "Welcome to the Breather's Keep." It felt like an omen, the words curling on the sign distorted as if mocking them. The door itself was ajar, swaying slightly in the night breeze. "Do we have to?" Ethan whispered, fear filling his voice. Clara swallowed hard. "We need help, honey. We'll just peek inside," she said. But even as she pushed the door wider, she felt the air shift around them, heavy with anticipation and the smell of decay. The inside was dark, shadows clinging to the walls, whispering secrets too low to decipher. The floor creaked loudly underfoot, echoing her growing terror. Clara clutched Ethan tight, ready to turn back at any moment. But then a sound broke the silence, a soft giggle, echoing from deeper inside. Chilled her. "What if it's another kid?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with fear and curiosity. "No, we can't trust anyone," Clara breathed, pulse racing. Yet she could feel the pull of that sound, that haunting giggle echoing like a taunt. Was it real, or just another trick of the night? Ethan squirmed in her grip. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Me too," she whispered, stepping forward despite every instinct telling her to run. As they ventured deeper into the house, Clara felt an undeniable chill in the air, a presence pulling them in. And just as they turned a corner, the giggle erupted again, louder, closer, dragging shadows with it. "What was that?" Ethan whimpered, pressing against her. The atmosphere crackled with a tension that made Clara's skin crawl. She wanted to scream, for them to leave, but curiosity gripped her, tangled with the terror wrapping around them. "Ethan, stay behind me," she instructed, but she could feel unease swelling within. The shadows shifted, pulling back just enough to reveal an apparition, a child, or perhaps something pretending to be one, standing at the end of the hallway, its hollow eyes fixed on them. "Why don't you come play with us?" It beckoned sweetly, a cruel mimicry of innocence. "Run." Clara gasped, dragging Ethan back as the child lunged forward. But the instant she turned to flee, she heard the laughter, now playing in perfect harmony with the whispers. Join us. Could they escape this tangled web of horror? What lay ahead in the suffocating darkness? The moment Clara's foot struck the threshold of the room, a tangible weight crashed against her chest, almost knocking the breath from her lungs. She gripped Ethan tighter, tearing her eyes from the ghastly figure at the end of the hallway. They were no longer just shadows. This thing had texture, a presence that reeked of lost innocence and twisted malice. Clara, Ethan murmured, peeking over her shoulder, his voice trembling like the ragged edges of the darkness itself. No, stay close, she snapped, but the urgency of her tone betrayed her own chilling fear. As they turned, the walls appeared to close in around them, the very fabric of the house seemingly alive and pulsating with dark intent. Hushed whispers encircled them, growing louder and more insistent. Join us, play with us. They darted down a narrow corridor, weaving between the stretching shadows. The laughter echoed, surrounding their frantic steps, mixing with the sounds of a heartbeat her own, pounding against her ribs like a war drum, and perhaps another, distant, lurking in the gloom. Clara's heart raced as they skidded to a stop at the far end of the hallway. She needed a door, a window, anything to escape this nightmare. But the only thing before her was a door painted in the same sickly hue, its handle gleaming like a beacon of hope that quickly soured into dread. Can we go in there? Ethan asked, his voice tiny, filled with a child's desperation for safety. Just hold on, Clara whispered, knowing it was just a door yet feeling the urge to shield him from whatever might lie beyond. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. A foul odor gusted out, like rotten fruit and something else, something metallic that made her stomach turn. The room was dimly lit by flickering candles, throwing eerie shadows against the walls. But it was not the room itself that drew her attention. It was the oddity of a large mirror standing prominently against the far wall, reflecting their terrified expressions back at them. Mommy, I don't like it here, Ethan whimpered, and Clara felt every word seep into her bones like ice. The mirror seemed to hum with energy, a gentle vibration that mirrored their racing hearts. Clara stepped closer, almost entranced, when sudden realization twisted in her gut. The reflections in the glass weren't entirely right. They looked off, shifting when they shouldn't, as if the mirror was a living thing fueled by their fear. Look, Clara gasped, her voice trembling. Ethan gave a small whimper, clutching her tighter as he gazed into the mirror. At that moment, a childlike hand reached out from the mirror, the fingers thin and twisted, stretching towards them. Play with us, it beckoned, the voice chillingly sweet, luring them in. Ethan, don't, Clara screamed, stepping back, but the child in the mirror simply smiled wider. The eyes glowed with the same hunger she'd felt outside, when the darkness whispered its sickening invitation. They both stumbled backward, their feet slipping as they scrambled to retreat. Then, without warning, the laughter erupted again, more potent and overwhelming. It washed over them, a wave of despair that threatened to drag them under. Mommy, Ethan cried, pulling on her shirt as if it could hold them both together in this nightmare. Clara knew they had to act. There was a way out. There had to be. We can't stay here, she yelled, her voice breaking through the laughter's tide. She turned to race back down the hall, but the shadows danced around them, growing thicker, more tangible. The giggling morphed into cries, shrill and heartbreaking. Mommy, they want to play. Ethan sobbed, terror wrapping around his voice. I want to let them take you, Clara shouted, determination flooding her veins. But the shadows were quick, flaring up, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down, the whispers like sinister promises. Clara's mind screamed with panic. They needed an escape. As if sensing her fear, the mirror pulsed, reflecting a vision that made her stomach churn, a vision of herself trapped beyond the glass, within that ghastly reflection. Fight, Mommy, Ethan shouted, a fierce strength in his tiny voice. With every ounce of will, Clara tore her eyes from the shimmering surface just in time to see figures rushing from the other end of the hallway. silhouettes, indistinct and swirling, their mouths stretching into wicked grins. Run! It was all Clara had time to scream before the shadows surged forward, claws reaching, laughter blaring. And as they sprinted down the corridor, the walls closed in, and the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. Clara felt the ground shift under their feet, a pulse of bewitching darkness, and knew they were deeper in the breather's keep than ever before. What horrors awaited them around the next turn? Would they ever find a way out, or was this simply the beginning of the end? Clara pushed Ethan ahead, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by a rising tide of darkness. Each breath felt heavier, as if the air was saturated with dread. The whispers grew frantic, invading her mind, winding through her thoughts like cold fingers. Join us, play with us, they twisted around her, sinister and playful. Ethan stumbled, glancing back over his shoulder, his eyes wide with fear. They're coming, he cried, barely a whisper. The shadows rippled at the corners of her vision, eager to claim them, and she could almost feel their icy breath. Just keep running, Clara urged, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The walls seemed to pulse like a living thing, narrowing with every frantic step. She spotted another door, a fleeting glimpse of wood, dull and uninviting, just a few steps ahead. Mommy, I'm scared. Ethan's voice cracked, desperation clawing at her heart. Not much further, Ethan. We'll be okay, she reassured, even as panic clawed at her throat. They reached the door, Clara's hand shaking as she grasped the handle. It wasn't locked, but dread pooled in her stomach as she pulled it open. A chill flooded out, wrapping around them like the embrace of the shadows. Clara hesitated, scanning the room. It was a small, cluttered space, filled with broken toys and dust-laden furniture. The faintest light flickered from a lone lamp in the corner, casting long shadows that danced against the walls. Yet, there was no time to dwell on the disarray. She felt the thrum of the darkness behind them, a reminder of how close they were to being ensnared. Go, she shouted. She pushed Ethan inside and stumbled in after him, slamming the door shut and leaning against it, breathless. The door shuddered violently, as if something was trying to break through. Mommy, what if I don't know? She interrupted, fear wrapping around her throat like a noose. We need to find another way out. They moved deeper into the room, keeping to the far wall. Clara's heart raced, each tick of her pulse drumming an ominous rhythm. The air felt thick, stifling, and with each step, the whispers grew beyond comprehension, blending into a cacophony that threatened to drown them. Ethan glanced around the room, his small frame tense. What if we hide? Clara bit her lip, glancing over her shoulder, tempted by the suggestion. We can't just hide. We have to find a way out. But doubt fluttered in her stomach. As she spoke, the shadows slithered under the door, darting across the floor like dark tendrils. Clara's breath hitched. Ethan, run! Before she even finished the command, she turned on her heel, and they raced toward a crack in the wall, a space she hoped led to another room. But when she reached for it, darkness surged, wrapping around her wrist like ice. Mommy! Ethan screamed, panic overtaking his voice, and she yanked her hand free just in time to see the shadows slink back, as if anticipating their next move. Clara stumbled but regained her balance, glancing at Ethan, his face ashen with fear. This way, she yelled, pointing toward a pile of debris, old crates and broken furniture. We can climb. Where will it take us? He gasped, eyes darting around. Anywhere but here. Together they clambered over the heap, a precarious fortress against the creeping dark. As she reached the top, a loud crash reverberated from the direction of the door, which splintered under an unseen force. Mommy! Ethan shrieked, his tiny body trembling against hers. And in that moment, she knew they were running out of time. They could hear the claws scraping against the wood, the shadows whispering promises of play. Clara's heart pounded as she spotted a window at the far end of the room, its glass clouded with years of grime. We can break through there. But before they could move, the door splintered open, revealing a writhing mass of darkness that surged forth hungry and relentless. Clara felt Ethan slip from her grip, his small, frightened face fading into the abyss of the shadows. "Ethan!" she screamed, stretching her hand toward him as he was pulled away. But the shadows were too fast, and as Clara lunged, a chilling voice echoed in her mind. "You can't save him, he is ours now." With frantic desperation, she raced toward the window, but the shadows surrounded her, ink-black tendrils reaching out, wrapping around her like a loveress embrace. As she smashed her fists against the glass, heart racing in time with the muffled laughter that filled the room, a new thought struck her. What if escape wasn't possible? What if the true terror lay in what she would have to confront to save Ethan? Would she be willing to join them? Would she play? And in the thickening darkness, Clara screamed, torn between love and madness, as the laughter swelled into a crescendo, enveloping them both completely. What horrors awaited her beyond that shattering glass? Would she succumb to the darkness, or could she find the strength to fight for Ethan? Clara's screams echoed off the broken walls, swallowed by the oppressive laughter of the shadows. The glass of the window shimmered like a distant promise, but it felt unattainable, each desperate thud of her fists sending sharp pangs of regret through her. The shadows constricted around her, drawing closer, whispering temptations of surrender. They promised ease, a release from fear, if only she let go, if only she accepted their invitation to play. "Ethan!" she cried again, desperation wrapping tightly around her heart, as more shadows poured like ink through the remains of the door. She had to make a decision: face the looming darkness or attempt to breach the safety of the glass. With fury coursing through her veins, Clara backed away from the shadows, eyes darting around the room searching for anything, any weapon, any tool, something to swing, to fight back. But there was only the debris, twisted and broken, a mockery of safety. "Think, Clara," she hissed to herself. "You're not alone." Wasn't he Ethan her anchor, her reason? The darkness slithered ever closer, thickening in the air, almost tangible in its malevolence. Through the chaos, the familiar giggle of children seeped into Clara's ears, taunting her. These were no ordinary shadows, they were echoes of lost children, too attached to their game of hide and seek. They wouldn't let her leave, wouldn't let her take Ethan back. But Clara was a mother. She'd push through anything for him. "Ethan!" she shouted, voice trembling with urgency. Yet, her call faded into the sinister chorus of laughter. Panic clawed at her throat. Where had they taken him? What horrors awaited him? An idea sparked deep within her, lunging forward like the shadows themselves. Breaking the glass might not mean freedom, but a last-ditch effort to confront whatever terror lay outside. It may be her only chance to shatter not just the glass, but the very bonds trapping her son in that abyss. "Stay back!" Clara shouted at the creeping shadows, brandishing one of the larger shards of broken wood like a blade. "You won't take him." But the shadows only laughed, shifting and writhing, as their voices merged into a low, eerie hum. Clara felt her blood run cold, and instinctively she raised the shard high, ready to strike. With all her strength, she turned toward the window and aimed for the glass. The shards reflected the flickering light of the lamp, the last vestige of brightness, and she felt her heart surge with determination. She thrust her weapon forward, aiming for the glass, hoping to breach beyond the confines of the room. "Please, let this break," she begged the universe, feeling tears stream down her cheeks. As the wood struck the glass, it shattered with a deafening crash, sending shards flying everywhere, glimmering like stars in the dark. The sheer force of the break unleashed a gust of wind that whipped through the room, scattering the darkness momentarily. "Ethan!" Clara gasped, stepping cautiously toward the jagged edges, breathing hard. In that fleeting moment, Clara got a glimpse of the corridor beyond, where Ethan's little frame was lodged in shadows, flailing against the icy grasp of the darkness. "I'm coming, sweetheart," she shouted, scrambling over debris, heart clawing its way into her throat. But the laughter morphed, deepening into something guttural. "You'll need to play our game to find him." The shadows surged forward once more, their grips tightening around her, flooding every crevice with dread and fear. Clara stumbled back, feeling cold tendrils coil around her feet, sapping the strength from her body. The choice echoed in her mind. Would she yield to the shadows, to their promises of safety and reunion? Or would she battle her way through terror itself for the chance to save her son? As the darkness inched closer, Clara felt a simmering rage ignite within her. I want to lose you, Ethan. And just as she steeled herself for the inevitable pushback, a tremor went through the floor beneath her. The shadows stilled for a brief moment and she felt a shift of pulse that rippled through the darkness. Flashes of light ignited the room, illuminating fractured wall murals that depicted children dancing, laughing, fading. Join us. Before it's too late, whispered the shadows, seductive and sweet. In an instant, Clara's resolve clashed with the encroaching dread. She was left standing at a precipice, torn between the desperate desire to save her son and the sinister allure of surrender. What caught her attention next froze the blood in her veins, a flicker of movement, of something far deeper lurking behind the shadows. Something they were all too afraid to reveal. What lay beneath the whispers? Underneath their maddening laughter? Clara gasped. What was the truth she'd been hiding from? And would she uncover it before it was too late? The floor trembled again, almost rhythmically, sending Clara reeling back. She could barely keep her footing. The air crackled with a wild energy, a sinister pulse that made her feel nauseous. The silhouettes around her swirled and danced, as if in delight at her terror. Their laughter harmonized, intertwining with the echoes of truth she feared to confront. Ethan, she screamed, the name tearing at her throat. She couldn't stand here any longer. She needed to move, needed to push through the darkness and find him. But it was as if the shadows were alive, rooting her in place with their icy fingers. She glanced toward the broken glass, shards reflecting the wavering light like molars of a shark waiting in dark waters. The corridor loomed ahead, an unknown void filled with whispers that clawed at her sanity. What lay beyond? Was it deliverance or doom? With a deep breath, Clara forced herself to pivot back toward the corridor, summoning every ounce of courage. From the depths of her fear, a whisper arose, clearer than any other sound. Find him, echoed through her mind as if the shadows themselves were pushing her forward. She took a step. The shadows surged, a chill wind whipping around her, hissing warnings in voices that twisted her heart. Play our game, or lose him forever. A peculiar notion gnawed at her. What exactly did they mean by game? Ignoring the insistent laughter, Clara stepped into the corridor that seemed uninviting, a dark tunnel stretching into an abyss. The air was thickening, like a heavy mist clinging to her skin, wrapping her in unsettling embrace. Every instinct told her to turn back, but each step so close to the walls filled her with a furious need. She focused her heart on Ethan, picturing his small face, his laughter. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye, just a shadow flitting past. But it was enough. Ethan, she shouted again, desperation spilling over. As if drawn to her voice, a small whimper echoed through the corridor. A flicker of hope ignited in her chest. She rushed ahead, the shadows clawing at her ankles as they receded. With every step she took, they loomed, shifting shapes blocking her way, whispering dark secrets of despair. Why didn't you save us? One shadow echoed, an innocent tone turned sinister, tugging at her memories. Another voice joined in, join us, Clara. We just want to play. The darkness seemed to morph, turning into grotesque faces reflecting her worst fears. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, blocking out the images. She pressed onward, the cold tightening around her throat, blurring the edges of her world. Suddenly, she stumbled into an open room, a small, faded nursery engulfed in shadow. An old, dusty crib stood in the center, once vibrant toys scattered on the floor. And there, amidst the shadows, she saw him, Ethan, trapped in a bubble of darkness, his small hands reaching out, eyes wide with fear. Mommy, he whimpered, his voice breaking her heart. Clara rushed to him, but before she could grasp him, the shadows snapped into a significant wall, encircling her. The laughter crescendoed, warping into a mocking chant. Join the game, Clara. Save him? Or lose everything? The room began to spin, colors swirling as a rush of energy surged through the floor, pulling her toward the shadows that now shifted ominously around her child. They were waiting, and in that moment, Clara understood they weren't just inviting her to play. They were asking for an offering. "Ethan," she shouted, lunging forward, desperation fueling her every move. But the shadows were relentless, pushing her back, making her choose. The truth clawed at her mind. To save Ethan, she'd have to confront the darkness itself. Could she sacrifice everything to break the bounds of the game, to reveal the horrors behind the laughter? Play or perish, the shadows whispered. What will you choose? In that moment, Clara felt time stretch out forever. The choice hung heavy between them, and the ultimatum lay stark and terrifying. Would she give in to the shadows? Would she join their twisted game? The last of her strength slipped as she braced for a final push. But the essence of a truth she so desperately needed to uncover flickered beneath the shadows. But what awaited her when the game began? A deeper darkness? Or a light that had been lost to her? With horror and resolve entwined, Clara made her choice. The floor trembled beneath her as she plunged into the shadows. Clara plunged herself into the shadows, heart pounding as she felt the tide of darkness pulling her deeper, its icy tendrils curling around her. She was ready for the horror to take her, to embrace the terror that had haunted every corner of this night. The world around her twisted, bending and warping, but she focused solely on Ethan. "Mommy!" His small, desperate voice rang out, pulling Clara from the depths of fear. She swiped ahead, clawing through the shadows, fueled by love and sheer determination. "I'm here, Ethan. I won't let you go." The darkness hissed, its whispers turning shrill with delight. "Join our game, Clara. All we need is a little sacrifice." Clara shook her head, defiance igniting the warmth within her heart. "I will not abandon my son." A flicker of light sparkled from somewhere ahead, and she bolted towards it, pushing through the dark frustration attempting to hold her back. Ethan's small figure became clearer with every desperate step. He stood in the center of a swirling void, encased in a cocoon of shadows that dragged at the edges of Clara's resolve. "Mommy!" he cried again, this time his voice quaking. "Hold on, sweetheart," Clara yelled, summoning a fierce bravery that coursed through her. She felt as if the very fabric of the night was testing her, but she pushed forward, remembering every moment of joy, every laugh, and every loving embrace, the memories of motherhood that could not be overshadowed. With a shout, Clara threw herself into the center of the darkness that engulfed Ethan. The shadows recoiled momentarily. Her presence was like a blazing sun. "You wanna play? Let us play," she declared, standing firm amid the chaos swirling around them. In that instant, the shadows shrieked with a sound that clawed at her ears, their grasp weakening as the light brightened around Clara. She reached out, hands extended, and Ethan leaped forward, collapsing into her arms. The bond between them ignited a warmth that spread outward, purging the uneasy cold of the night. The shadows began to swirl violently, retreating from the combined force of their love. "No, this isn't how it's supposed to be," they howled, shadows slinking back as the flickering light fought against them. "I choose my son," Clara shouted, every syllable a sword cutting through the darkness. As they became wrapped in her fierce love, the shadows shrieked, the laughter melting into furious howls. A wave of brilliant light erupted from Clara, overwhelming the sinister whispers and disbanding the shadows in a flash. "All of you go back. You can't have us." Clara's voice rang like a siren, shattering their spell. As the shadows fell away, leaving behind echoes of lost laughter, light flooded the space, illuminating every corner of the nursery and revealing illusions that had tried to trap them. Echoes of other children faded into the light, finally freed from the darkness, the laughter returning to joyous notes of reunion. With a deep breath, Clara looked down at Ethan, who was resting in her embrace. His small hands clutched at her shirt, eyes wide and trust unwavering. "We did it, Mommy," he breathed, a smile breaking through the fear. "Yes, we did it together," Clara replied, her heart swelling with pride and relief. The nursery around them was now filled with warmth. Its grimness melted away by a powerful connection that not even the darkest shadows could extinguish. Hand in hand, they found the exit of the nursery, stepping into a world still draped in Halloween's shadow but now promising hope. The darkness had not vanished entirely, but it had shifted with newfound meaning, transformed into a mere backdrop against the brilliance of love and courage. Clara turned to Ethan, leaning down to meet his gaze. Tonight we faced fear. No more of it will steal our joy. We are stronger than that. Can we go home now? Ethan whispered, his innocence somehow a balm against the evening's terrors. Yes, sweet boy. Home? Clara replied, and together they stepped into the moonlit street, where laughter danced on the wind and the warm glow of jack-o'-lanterns lit their path, a true sweet escape from the night that tried to ensnare their souls. As they walked away from that haunted horror, Clara felt a fierce resolve settle in her heart. They would always treasure Halloween, the night they chose love over fear, and found their way home, forever bonded by the battle against shadows. So as the last echoes of the trick-or-treaters faded, remember, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and let the world know you love this tale. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Clara and Ethan's journey. What did you think of their fight against darkness? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.